Danger from animals. At this point, you will probably leave and go back to camp to secure companions or a pack animal to help in getting your venison out of the woods. If you are in ordinary country where bear are thick, it may be a good idea to discourage their presence by leaving some article of clothing flapping nearby. One of us has had a big blackie and her two cubs clean up the hindquarters of two large bucks shot just before sunset and return for the next forenoon. Wolves are far more cautious. We've cleaned out a moose during an early northern night with a pack howling only yards away in the blackness. Sure, they would not bother the meat before we returned, we just left it on the snow. Tracks when we went after the animal with a horse the next morning showed that the 7 in the pack never did venture closer than 50 feet. One other time, however, we had to leave a butchered moose out a week in the mountains because of the weather. When we got there, that time the snow for 100 feet all around had been flattened down as slick as a skating rink. Only one shin bone remained within even that area. That was the only instance when timber wolves have ever troubled any of our meat. Packing. The easiest way to get the venison out of the woods is with a horse. This is common practice in the West. In the East, some hunting camps keep a horse for this purpose. If the animal is spooky, stroke and pet him some, and during the process rub a little of the blood on his nose. Ordinarily, you can tie a deer across or in front of the riding saddle. With something such as a moose, you'll perhaps cut it up and divide the sections between two pack animals. If the snow is on the ground, you may drag the unskinned quarry by its head after cutting off the legs at what is usually thought of as the knees, but are actually the ankles. Dragging it most easily accomplished with a harness. However, you can take a half hitch high around the tail, bend back the hair, and then take a second half hitch around the now doubled tail. The usual saddle horse will then skid even a good-sized moose out without any discomfort if conditions are halfway good. If the experience is a new one, the horse will probably settle down after you remain in the saddle as much as possible. Snugking the rope around the saddle horn is not such a good idea if you are going more than a few feet. Manpower. Deer can be dragged head first by a couple of husky hunters. They are often carried on a stout pole, back hanging down and feet tied up over the timber. The head should also be lashed up so that it won't dangle and continue to throw the load off balance. As a matter of fact, a deer lugged more than a short distance in this fashion will swing so much that you will very probably soon be weighing the advisability of cutting a second pole and using the two of them as a stretcher. This, once the animal has been tied on solidly, can be carried at any height. One ordinary rugged man can carry a deer by himself unless it dresses out a lot too far above 100 pounds. There are two handy ways of accomplishing this. We prefer to drape the animal over our shoulders like a scarf and to hold on to its legs. This way, if you start to slip or stumble, you can get rid of the load in a hurry. If you've tied it into a pack by lashing the legs together, you may fall and find an uncomfortable amount of weight pressing you down. A common way of carrying deer, nevertheless, is by tying all four legs together and then running your head between body and legs, with the shank ends held down in front of your chest with one hand, the flats on the sides of one fore and hind leg, then rest on your shoulders and do not cut in. It is almost impossible to carry a heavy deer any distance piggyback because of the way the sharp bones bite into the shoulders. If under any circumstance whatsoever you carry a deer through a forest frequented by other hunters, tie a red bandana, handkerchief, or strips of bright red cloth conspicuously around it. It isn't a bad idea either to sing in a loud voice. Skinning. If you are an old-time hunter, you'll very possibly prefer to complete the skinning on the spot as described in the chapter on furs, trophies, and rawhide. You may pretty well have to do this if your trophy is big. There are exceptions, of course, depending generally on the available methods of transportation and to some degree on the weather. In any event, you'll want to get the hide off as soon as reasonably practical. The meat should be allowed to cool thoroughly with the least possible delay. Unless the animal is a small one and is opened wide, it won't cool quickly in temperate weather with the skin on, and if you're in a cold climate, you'll want to complete the skinning before the hide freezes on, or what would have been an hour's work may very easily develop into a cold and disagreeable all-day chore. For the good of the meat, don't toss a whole deer, skin and all, in the warm front of your car to motor it back that way. It's a very pleasant feeling all around to drive back to friends and family with the entire animal on display, and in some of the big old cars with high sweeping fenders you could get away with it. In far too many instances, however, the fine, delicate flavor of the venison is tainted, if not completely spoiled, by this practice. Quartering. Once the carcass is free of the skin, which you have been shifting about so as to keep the meat as clean as possible, quartering will be in order. Unless you intend to save the head, ease the point of your blade deeply into the cartilages between the skull and the first vertebrae, severing them as well as you can. Then twist the head abruptly in one direction and then in the other, and it will snap free. With an axe, or ideally a meat saw, split the bone from the belly cut to the neck. Open the neck longitudinally on the same line and remove the windpipe and gullet. Then split the backbone from the neck to tail. The animal will now be in two halves. Quarter it by cutting each of these halves along the line of the lowest ribs. Protection. You will now choose to rub flour on these quarters and to wrap them in cheesecloth to discourage pests. Sprinkling black pepper on the flesh will also help to keep blue bottles and such annoyances off. You will also probably want to examine the meat every day or so to make sure it remains unbothered, giving particular attention to bullet wounds and to folds and nicks in the flesh. Any eggs or larvae so detected can be quickly and harmlessly scraped, wiped, or if you wish, cut away. In any event, the quarters can now cool quickly, especially if you hang them high in a tree to hasten the chilling the first night. Some of the pack trains in the Canadian Rockies, hunting early so as to be back down in the lowlands before snow sets in too deeply, keep fresh game sweet by trimming the branches out of the tree and pulling the meat up into that clear 20 feet or more from the ground where blowflies do not operate. A meat tent is a handy thing to pack along in hot weather. If you have a large enough outfit to warrant its inclusion, a handy model often seen in survey camps in the wilderness consists of canopied netting with a zipper opening. The shelter is customarily tied in a dark, well-ventilated spot by a single rope that runs from its top center. Refrigeration. Keep these quarters as cool and dry as possible. If you are heading outside, get them into refrigeration as soon as you can. If a long and warm auto trip lies ahead, try at the earliest opportunity both to pack each quarter in a carton of dry ice and to secure those containers in larger ones with crumpled newspaper between for insulation. Circumstances may be such, too, that you'll prefer to travel in the comparative coolness of the night. If the weather is hot and the distance far, you will probably do well to lay over a day in some locality where you can have the meat frozen solid. This may be a desirable time to cut and wrap it in plainly labeled packaging that can be retrieved from the freezer and used one by one. Odd portions can be ground into hamburger along with a desirable proportion of beef fat if you want. It should then be an easy job with the help of dry ice, which these days is obtainable among most routes, to bring these packages frozen to your cold storage cabinet, drawer, locker, or butcher's cold room. You'll have some really fine meat.